It was a Wednesday night, just after 11 p.m., when the knock came. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I'd been half asleep on the couch, one of those accidental naps you slip into while scrolling TikTok and pretending you'll go to bed soon. But then came another knock, this time louder, more frantic. I dragged myself to the door, annoyed, still in sweats and a hoodie, expecting a neighbor locked out or maybe someone delivering to the wrong apartment. I didn't expect to open the door and see him. Tyler fucking Moore. My heart skipped. I stared. He looked wrecked. Wet hair plastered to his forehead like he'd been caught in the rain, hoodie damp, face pale in the hallway light. But his eyes, those gray-blue eyes I knew too well, were rimmed red. His jaw clenched, like he was trying to keep himself from falling apart. He said nothing at first. Just stood there, breathing heavily. Then he whispered, "Can I come in?" It had been 12 years. 12 years since high school. Since he shoved me into lockers, flicked the back of my ears in the cafeteria, called me every name in the book. 12 years since I last saw him smirking behind the football bleachers, while his friends laughed at whatever slur he'd just tossed my way. I should have slammed the door, or at least asked what the hell he was doing here. But instead, I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, dripping water on my hallway rug, glancing around like he wasn't sure if this was real. I closed the door behind him and turned to face the guy who used to make me feel like I was nothing. He looked older now. Softer? Maybe. Not physically. He was still tall, broad-shouldered, with the same ex-quarterback frame. But something in him had changed. His eyes weren't sharp anymore. They were tired. "Can I sit?" he asked, voice rough. "Sure," I said, still numb. I followed him into the living room. He dropped onto the couch like his body gave out on him. And then he started crying. Not loud sobs. Not dramatic movie tears. Just this quiet, broken sound, like something in him cracked, and he didn't know how to glue it back together. He covered his face with his hands, trying to hide it, shoulders shaking. I stood there, frozen. "You okay?" I asked, knowing it was a dumb question. Clearly he wasn't. "I didn't know where else to go," he murmured into his palms. "I drove around for an hour. And then I remembered you lived here. I looked you up a couple months ago, found your Instagram. I didn't follow you or anything. I knew you were here." I slowly sank into the armchair across from him, still trying to catch up. "I don't understand," I said. "Why now? Why me?" He exhaled, wiping his face with the sleeve of his hoodie. "Because I needed to say I'm sorry, and I needed to say it to the one person I owe it to most." There it was. A sentence I never thought I'd hear in my life. He looked up at me then, eyes raw. "I was such an asshole to you. You didn't deserve any of it. You were just being yourself, and I couldn't handle that. I was so angry all the time. At myself, at my dad, at the shit I was feeling and didn't understand." He paused, swallowing hard. "I made you my target because you were braver than me. Even back then." I felt something shift in my chest. "I wasn't brave," I said quietly. "I was terrified every day." Tyler nodded. "And I made it worse. I know. I think about it all the time. I think about what it must have been like for you. And it kills me, because He stopped, like the next word got stuck in his throat. "I liked you," he finally said, barely above a whisper. "I think I liked you even back then. And I didn't know how to deal with that. So I made your life hell." My breath caught. Everything in the room fell silent, like the whole world paused to let that sentence hang in the air. I looked at him, really looked at him. This wasn't the Tyler Moore I remembered. This wasn't the guy who once tripped me in gym class and laughed as I hit the ground. This was someone else. Someone raw and unsure and human. And for reasons I didn't fully understand, I couldn't look away. I didn't know what to say. I stared at him, watching as he wiped his nose on the cuff of his sleeve like a kid. This 6'2" man, my high school tormentor, looked like he was about to crumble. "I liked you," he'd said. I wasn't sure which part stunned me more, that he admitted it, or that part of me had suspected for years. Not consciously, maybe. But there had always been something in the way he looked at me after knocking my books over. The hesitation before the cruelty, the flare of something too intense in his eyes. "You sure you're not drunk?" I asked, partly to break the silence, partly because I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that Tyler Moore was sitting here, spilling his guts like a confession. "No," he said quickly. "I haven't had a drink in 3 months." That surprised me. The Tyler I used to know would have been the last guy at the party, red Solo cup in hand, shotgunning beers with the rest of the varsity crowd. "Okay," I said, carefully. "So, what happened? You don't just knock on someone's door a decade after bullying them because you got nostalgic." Tyler gave a humorless laugh. "Yeah, guess I deserve that." "You do," I said, sharper than I meant to. He flinched, and I hated that some part of me immediately felt bad about it. He took a deep breath, staring at the floor. "I got dumped 2 days ago. Engagement over, apartment gone. I've been crashing in my car. Then tonight, I just snapped. I was sitting in the parking lot of this shitty diner, thinking about calling someone. Anyone. But there was no one." His voice cracked a little on the last part. "No family?" I asked. "My mom passed. My dad, we don't talk. Haven't in years." I didn't say anything. Not out of sympathy. I just didn't know what part of this mess to react to first. He rubbed his eyes. "I just kept thinking about you, about how I treated you. And I hated that if I died tomorrow, the only memory you'd have of me was some asshole who made high school miserable." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. This was surreal. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Offer him a hug? Tell him it was okay? Because it wasn't. But it also wasn't nothing. "I should hate you," I said finally. Tyler nodded. "You probably do." "I did," I admitted. "For a long time." Silence. "But," I added, "people grow up. Some, anyway." Tyler looked at me, and for the first time since he walked in, there was something like hope behind his eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I just needed to try, needed to say it." I studied him. The tired posture, the ragged clothes, the deep grooves under his eyes. This was a guy who'd clearly lost something. Maybe more than one thing. "You hungry?" I asked, standing up. He blinked. "What?" "I've got leftover lasagna in the fridge. It's not great, but it's edible." His expression shifted, like the tiniest bit of tension drained from his shoulders. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'm starving." I walked to the kitchen, still not sure what the hell I was doing. He stayed on the couch, quiet, hands folded in his lap like a kid waiting to be scolded. I pulled out the Tupperware, popped it in the microwave, and leaned against the counter. I couldn't ignore the weird flutter in my chest. I told myself it was just shock, or disbelief, or some leftover anger that hadn't found its way out yet. But I also remembered the way he looked at me in the hallway just now. And maybe, just maybe, there was something else buried in there too. When I handed him the plate, our fingers brushed for the briefest second. Neither of us pulled away. Tyler ate like he hadn't had a real meal in days. He barely said a word, just sat hunched over the plate on my couch, forking lasagna into his mouth like he was trying to outrun his own hunger. I sat in the armchair again, legs pulled up, pretending to scroll on my phone but not looking at anything. Every few minutes, I'd glance over. He looked different in the soft glow of my living room lamp. Less like the guy who used to trip me in the school hallway, more like someone who'd been wandering through a storm for a long time and finally made it inside. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, then looked over at me. "I don't know if I've said this clearly," he said, "but thank you for letting me in. You didn't have to do that." I nodded, trying not to overthink the way he was looking at me. Gentle, uncertain, vulnerable in a way I never imagined possible. "Yeah," I said, still kind of questioning it. He gave a small smile. "Fair." There was a beat of silence, the kind that stretches just a little too long and starts to feel charged. "Do you remember that day in gym class?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Tyler furrowed his brow. "Which day?" "The one where you pantsed me in front of everyone." His face darkened instantly. "Damn, yeah, I remember." You called me. I know what I called you, he interrupted, voice low. And I've never forgiven myself for it. That caught me off guard. You're not the only one who remembers that day, he added, quieter now. It's haunted me more than you know. I swallowed hard. The memory had never really gone away from me. It lived somewhere deep in my chest, filed under the long list of moments that taught me to hide who I was. I hated you for that, I said. Not to hurt him, but because it was true. I hated myself, too, he replied. Then he looked at me again. I didn't do it to humiliate you. I mean, yes, I did humiliate you, but that wasn't the real reason I did it. What was the real reason? He hesitated, looked down at his hands. I think I was trying to punish you for being something I couldn't be. You were free. You were yourself. Even if it scared you sometimes, you never tried to hide it the way I did. And I hated you for having that kind of courage. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't brave, I repeated. I was just trying to survive. Exactly, Tyler said, and I made it harder for you. I was the coward, not you. There was another pause, heavier now. I looked at him, really looked at him. His damp hoodie, his tired face, the mess of emotions behind his eyes. I realized that I didn't feel anger anymore. I wasn't even sure I felt pity. What I felt was something more complicated. Something I didn't know how to name yet. You got a place to stay tonight? I asked. He blinked. No, I nodded slowly. You can crash here. Couch pulls out. Tyler looked stunned for a second, then nodded, swallowing whatever emotion had just welled up. Thanks, he said, voice a little hoarse. I stood and walked toward the hallway closet to grab him some blankets. When I came back, he was still sitting there, watching me like he was afraid if he blinked I'd change my mind. As I handed him the blanket, our hands brushed again, longer this time. He didn't pull away, neither did I. There was something in the air now, tense, quiet, and unmistakably new. And as I turned to go to my bedroom, I felt his eyes follow me all the way down the hall. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept staring at the ceiling, eyes burning in the dark, my body tense under the blanket even though my apartment was warm. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind would drift back to the sound of his voice, how it cracked when he apologized, or the look in his eyes when I handed him the blanket. That was the problem. It wasn't just that Tyler Moore, the guy who once shoved me into a locker so hard I had a bruise for a week, was now sleeping 10 feet away on my pull-out couch. It was that I didn't hate having him there. I got out of bed around 2 a.m., not even pretending to be tired anymore. I padded down the hallway, barefoot, careful not to make too much noise. The living room was dark, but the faint city glow through the blinds lit just enough of the space. Tyler was lying on his side, the blanket half kicked off, his arm tucked under the pillow. He looked peaceful, softer than I remembered, younger, somehow, even with the stress lines on his forehead. I stood there for a second, unsure why I'd come out here in the first place. Then his eyes opened. Sorry, I whispered quickly. Didn't mean to wake you. He didn't look startled, just tired. You okay? He asked. I shrugged. Couldn't sleep. Tyler pushed himself up slightly on one elbow. His hair was a mess, sticking up in odd directions, and his voice was raspy from sleep. You want to sit for a bit? He asked. I hesitated, then walked over and sat down at the end of the couch, on the edge, like I wasn't sure if I should be there. He scooted back a little to make space. Neither of us said anything for a while. We just sat there, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. I used to watch you from across the quad, he said suddenly. I turned to look at him. In college, he clarified. Freshman year, I saw you a couple times. You were always with your friends, laughing. You looked happy. My eyebrows furrowed. Wait, you went to Wilmington? For a semester, he nodded. Transferred out after fall. Too much of a mess back then. But I remember seeing you. I wanted to come say something. I just couldn't. You knew what you'd done. Yeah, he said, his voice small. That, and I didn't think I deserved to be anywhere near you. I looked away, focusing on the stretch of carpet between my feet. There were so many things I could have said. Angry things, poetic things, even sarcastic things. But none of them felt right. You still feel that way? I asked finally. Sometimes, he admitted. But tonight, when I knocked on your door, I just hoped maybe you could see me as something more than that kid who hurt you. I looked at him again. You know what's weird? I said. I think I can. Tyler's eyes searched mine in the dark. There was a silence. Heavy, but not uncomfortable. I never thought I'd see you again, I added. And if I did, I figured I'd spit in your face or something. He gave a weak chuckle. You still can. I probably earned it. I shook my head. Nah, that version of you. I think he's already gone. He looked like he didn't know what to do with that. Like the idea of being forgiven was something he hadn't allowed himself to consider. Then he said something I didn't expect. Do you ever think about how things could have been different? What do you mean? If I hadn't been such a dick, he said, if I just said something, back then, about how I felt. I didn't answer right away. Because, yeah, I had thought about that plenty of times. I'd wondered what might have happened if he had pulled me aside one day, said he liked my smile, said he wanted to sit next to me at lunch instead of knock my tray out of my hands. I don't know, I said eventually, but we're here now. That was the closest I could get to telling him I didn't regret him showing up at my door. He gave a soft nod. Then, before I could second-guess it, I laid my hand down next to his. Not touching. Just close enough to make a point. His fingers shifted, grazing mine. Not holding. Not grabbing. Just that subtle contact. And for now, that was enough. I don't remember falling asleep on the couch, but when I opened my eyes, the sun was already creeping through the blinds, casting thin gold lines across the living room floor. Tyler was still asleep, his back turned toward me now, the blanket tangled around his legs. The faint rise and fall of his shoulders was the only sound besides the soft rumble of city traffic outside. For a moment, I just watched him. There was a calmness to his face I hadn't seen before. No tension in his brow, no tight jaw. He looked peaceful. Maybe he hadn't slept like this in a while. Maybe, for once, he felt safe. I stood slowly, stretching the stiffness out of my legs. The touch from the night before, his fingers brushing mine, lingered in my head like static. It hadn't been romantic. Not exactly, but it hadn't been nothing either. In the kitchen, I started a pot of coffee, trying to ignore the weird tangle of emotions in my chest. I wasn't even sure what I felt. It wasn't attraction. At least, not just that. It was this confusing mix of old wounds, buried grudges, and a strange new thread of something fragile that hadn't been there before. Tyler walked in while I was staring at the coffee maker, barefoot and groggy, hair still a mess. Morning, he said, voice scratchy. I glanced at him. You sleep okay? He nodded, rubbing his eyes. Better than I have in months. I poured 2 mugs without asking and slid one toward him. He took it with a small, grateful smile and leaned against the counter next to me. I know this is probably weird, he said after a sip. That you showed up crying on my doorstep after 12 years and slept on my couch? No, not weird at all. I deadpanned. He smirked. Okay, fair. We stood in silence for a minute, sipping coffee. I could feel him looking at me, but I didn't meet his eyes right away. What happens now? He asked quietly. I looked over. What do you mean? I mean, are we just 2 guys who had one weird night and go back to being strangers? Or is there something here? I blinked. You mean like, here? He didn't flinch. Yeah. I leaned back against the sink, processing. You were the first guy who ever made me feel ashamed of who I was, I said honestly. But last night, you were also the first person who made me feel seen in a long time. Tyler's throat bobbed as he swallowed. I never stopped thinking about you, he said, even when I didn't know why. Back in high school, I thought it was just jealousy or something, but it wasn't. I was scared because I liked you, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I pushed you away. Hard. I nodded slowly, watching the way his hands wrapped around the coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. You've got a lot of making up to do, I said, not as a threat, just a fact. I know, he said. I don't expect you to trust me overnight. We stood there for another long moment, not talking. Then he said, "Can I stay?" "Just a few days, until I figure things out." I looked at him. Really looked. And this time, I didn't see the guy who bullied me. I saw a man trying. Maybe for the first time, to be honest. With me. With himself. "Yeah," I said softly. "You can stay." His eyes searched mine for a second longer, and then something in his expression broke open. Relief. Gratitude. And maybe something more. Neither of us said anything after that. But when I walked past him to grab my charger from the living room, his fingers brushed my wrist. Just briefly. I didn't move away. And neither did he. Tyler stayed. At first, it was just the couch, his duffel bag tucked neatly against the armrest, the blanket always folded when I got up in the morning. He didn't take up much space, like he was trying to be as invisible as possible. He helped with dishes without being asked. Bought groceries on day 3. Even insisted on paying me back for using my shampoo. But slowly, things shifted. We started talking more, not just about the past, but about stupid stuff. Shows we were watching. Music we discovered. I learned he still liked the same terrible energy drinks he did in high school. He found out I still couldn't cook anything more complicated than pasta. Some nights we'd both end up on the couch, not touching, just sitting too close watching a movie we weren't really paying attention to. The kind of closeness that hummed with something unspoken. One night, after a couple beers, I asked him, "So, what was the moment you figured it out? That you liked guys?" He didn't even pretend to dodge the question. "You?" That stopped me cold. "Wait, me? Like, back then?" He nodded, eyes fixed on his beer bottle. "9th grade. You wore this black hoodie with a little rip in the sleeve. You'd tug on it during math class when you were nervous." I froze. I hadn't thought about that in years. "I don't know why it got to me," he continued. "But one day you laughed at something, and I remember thinking, I wish I could be the reason he laughs like that." My chest went tight. I'd spent so many years thinking of Tyler as this one-dimensional villain in my story. But now, sitting here, hearing that he remembered details like the rip in my hoodie, it felt like I was rewriting my own past in real time. "You know what's messed up?" I said. "What?" "I used to imagine you apologizing. Over and over. Some fantasy where you said everything I needed to hear. But none of it ever felt like this." He looked at me, eyes soft. "Better or worse?" "Just real," I said. He nodded slowly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of something else, like we were both waiting for something to tip the balance. Then I asked, "So what do you want now?" He didn't answer right away. "I want to stop running," he said finally. "From myself, from who I was, from the people I hurt." His eyes locked on mine. "And I want to earn my way into your life, if you'll let me." I looked at him, the guy who once made me flinch in hallways, now sitting here with his heart in his hands, asking for a second chance, not just as a friend, but maybe as something more. "I'm not promising anything," I said. He smiled softly. "I wouldn't believe you if you did." Then, just as I stood to clear our bottles, his fingers reached out and touched mine. Just the lightest graze. This time, I turned my hand over and let our fingers stay there, just barely hooked. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't a confession, but it was something. And for now, it was enough. It happened a week after he moved in. We were doing what we usually did those nights, sitting too close on the couch, pretending to focus on the movie, both of us acting like we didn't notice how many times our arms brushed. Tyler had been quieter than usual that evening. Not sad, just thoughtful. Every now and then I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. "You ever think about what it would have been like if we'd figured this out sooner?" he asked softly during the end credits. I paused, staring at the screen. "Sometimes," I said, "but I also don't know if I would have trusted it. Back then, I didn't even trust myself." He nodded. "Yeah, me neither. We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't feel awkward, just full, like there was too much to say, and neither of us wanted to ruin it by saying the wrong thing. Then he shifted, slowly, like he was giving me time to stop him. His hand reached out, not bold, not aggressive, just a gentle touch against my knee. I looked down at it, then up at him. "I'm not trying to rush anything," he said, barely above a whisper. Can I?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what he meant yet. But then he leaned in, slow and careful, giving me every second to say, "No, I didn't." When his lips met mine, it wasn't like fireworks. It wasn't dramatic or intense. It was quiet, steady, familiar in a way that didn't make sense, like something I'd been waiting for without realizing. His hand moved to the side of my face, and I felt his thumb graze my cheekbone. My heart was pounding, but I didn't pull away. And when we did break apart, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I needed to breathe. We looked at each other for a long second. I think we both realized something in that moment. It wasn't just about the kiss. It was about everything leading up to it. The years of confusion, the pain, the anger, the regret, and the slow, deliberate rebuilding of something we'd both thought was long gone. "You're shaking," he whispered. I looked down at my hands. "Yeah," he laced his fingers with mine. "Me too." That night, we didn't sleep in separate rooms. We didn't even pretend to. We curled up together on the couch like we'd done it 100 times before. No kissing, no touching beyond that one shared hand between us. But I felt his breath against my neck, the steady rise and fall of his chest. The warmth of someone who used to haunt me in the worst way, now wrapped around me like something I didn't know I needed. We didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But I think we both knew. Something had started. And neither of us was running from it anymore. The weirdest thing about falling for someone who once made your life miserable is how your memories start to rearrange themselves. It didn't erase what Tyler did. I didn't forget the bruises, the humiliation, or the sting of being 16 and afraid to walk into class. But I also couldn't ignore what came after. Waking up with him still next to me, his face tucked into the crook of my neck like he belonged there. Morning coffee with quiet smiles and sleepy eyes. The way he said my name now, soft, like it meant something. Like I meant something. We didn't rush anything. It wasn't some overnight redemption arc. But slowly, he carved a space in my life. He got a part-time job at a bike shop down the block, started therapy, paid me rent even when I told him he didn't have to yet. Some nights, I'd find him on the balcony, smoking a clove cigarette like he was in a French indie film, staring out at the skyline with this look that said he was still figuring things out. But at least now, he wasn't doing it alone. And every now and then, when I least expected it, he'd say something that made me feel like all the broken pieces had been worth it. Like one night, we were in bed, legs tangled, some low playlist humming in the background, and I asked, "Do you think the version of you who used to hate me would believe this?" He turned his head, eyes half-lidded from sleep. "That version of me was a coward," he said. I don't think he believed in anything. I traced a line down his chest. "So who are you now?" He smiled at me, slow and unguarded. "Someone who's trying really hard to be the kind of man you deserve." I didn't say anything, just kissed him, quiet and grateful. Because this wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about choosing each other every day, even with the mess. Maybe especially because of it. There are still days I wonder what would have happened if we'd gotten here sooner. If I'd been braver or he'd been less afraid. But then I remember. Some stories aren't meant to begin until you're both ready to be the version of yourselves that can hold something real. He was my childhood bully. Now he's the person who holds me when I have nightmares. The one who makes dinner on Wednesdays because he knows I work late. The man who says, "I'm sorry," even when it's hard, and means it. We don't have a perfect history, but we're writing something better now, together.